Okay, so the topic of this video is going to be proper study habits and study skills. So let's get started. Imagine that you're an athlete, maybe lacrosse, maybe volleyball, maybe baseball. Let's talk about how you prepare for that sport. So let's examine this calendar here. Maybe on the 1st is our first day of baseball, and then on the 17th is our first game. So in between, you, your coach, your teammates, you're meeting for practice probably around 2 to 3 hours a day, and even on the weekends, you're probably doing practice on your own. So come the first game, you can be sure of giving your best effort. Maybe you're more into the performing arts. Maybe you're a drummer. Maybe you're in drama. Maybe you're in the choir. Let's talk about how you prepare for those. So on our calendar, the 1st is our first day of orchestra, and the 17th, let's say, is our concert. Well, in between, you're meeting, you're rehearsing, probably for a couple hours a day, and you're probably even rehearsing on the weekend so you can be sure of giving your best performance. Okay, now be honest. Do we follow that same daily pattern of practice and rehearsal when it comes to our academics? Now, when do you normally begin to study for a test? Let's pretend that Monday the 1st you start a chapter, and as the days go by, you learn more and more and more material associated with that unit. And on the 10th, your teacher might announce in 1 week, we're going to have a test. But then your teacher continues with the daily lesson. And eventually we come to the 17th, boom, test day, time for you to show how much you've prepared and how ready you are. You know, I've been a teacher since 1999, and I've been surveying students about when do they choose to study for a test. And here are the top 3 answers. The number 1 most common answer is the day before the test. The number 2 most common answer, going back to my surveys starting in 1999, 2 days before the test. And the third most common answer is the day of the test. And these are the habits I want to address in this video. Imagine if we prepared for our athletics like this. So in our baseball situation, imagine if in between the 1st and the 16th, we're not doing any practice, and we only practice 1 day before the game. Imagine how ill prepared we would be for that contest. Imagine if we prepared for the performing arts like this. So imagine in our orchestra calendar, knowing there's a concert on the 17th, if we start rehearsing on the 16th, imagine how ill prepared we would be for that concert. Now, most athletes and most performing artists would never do this, but this is how many students are choosing to prepare for their academics, and that's the problem I want to address. So by looking at our calendar here, the problem is by not spending some time reviewing, we're going to forget a lot of material. And even though we might study some on the 16th, trying to remember 2.5 weeks of information is very difficult. So does this method of waiting 1 day before the test to study work? Well, in your early school years, it very well might have. In the early years of school, you may have chosen this study method and still pulled off A's and B's. But you're going to notice that as you get to your later years of school, the subjects are too difficult. There's too much information. And by trying this later on in your school years, you're going to start to see a decline in your grades. So now adjustments need to be made. So the brain is very forgetful, and here's a quick test. Now pretend today is that Thursday. You might be watching this video on a Monday. You might be watching this video on a Friday, but pretend it's that Thursday. What'd you have for dinner 1 day ago? You can probably still remember. It's still fairly fresh in your head. But go back 2 days. What'd you have for dinner 2 nights ago? That becomes more difficult. What'd you have for dinner 3 days ago? It's only been 3 days. You probably can't remember. What'd you have for dinner 1 week ago? And I hope you see my point. The brain is very forgetful if you don't stop and think about things and refresh your memory. So not only is the brain forgetful, but you've also learned a whole lot of information over the past 17 days. You've learned 17 days of biology, but that's not all. You've also learned 17 days of new math. You've also learned 17 days probably of a foreign language. 17 days of perhaps an English literature class. 17 days of history. So I hope you see my point. If we wait until the day before the test to study, you might remember some of the more recent days, but you're probably going to struggle at some of the further dates back in your unit. And so now you're trying to reteach yourself 2.5 weeks of information in one night. That's the problem I want to combat. Okay, before I go any further, here's a fun little test. Guess the lowest test score between these 4 units. Chapter 1, Introduction to Biology. Chapter 4, Photosynthesis, Cellular Respiration. Chapter 6, Mitosis and Meiosis. Chapter 29, the Nervous System. Every year, the lowest test average is Introduction to Biology. Chapter 1. This should be the easiest topic of the school year, and it's always my lowest test of the year. Well, why is that? Because it's earlier in the school year. Many students prepare for this test using the poor habits that we've discussed. But as the school year goes on, they learn better habits, and even though the topics are much more challenging, their performance is greater. So let's go into that next. So am I suggesting then that students do this? Am I suggesting students spend 2 hours a day studying just like they spend 2 hours at baseball practice and 2 hours at orchestra? No, there's not enough hours in the day. This is not what I am suggesting. Well, so what am I suggesting? I'm suggesting that you create a study calendar where, let's say, you spend 20 or 30 minutes devoted to class A, 20 or 30 minutes devoted to class B on a Monday. And then the next day, you spend 20 or 30 minutes devoted to class C, 20 or 30 minutes devoted to class D. And you repeat this pattern as the week goes on. Obviously, take Friday night off, but then, Saturday afternoon, get back to it. Maybe take Sunday off, but then Monday the following week, get back to it. And you create this calendar, this plan, where you're dividing up your time and your resources and your efforts. So by keeping the material fresh in your head, you're more likely to remember. So how can you spend these 20 to 30 minutes studying? I love analogies. Pretend your job is to build this house. Well, in order to build a house, you need a whole bunch of tools. So start thinking, what tools do you need? A hammer is one very important tool. A saw is another very important tool. A drill, another very important tool. A wrench, another very important tool. In fact, you're going to need a whole bunch of tools in order to build this house. Now, one tool alone, you cannot build the house. But with the entire collection of tools, you can. And here's my analogy. Well, what study tools do you use? Whenever I ask young students this, they almost always tell me these two. They will read their class notes before a test, and they'll make flashcards. These are good tools. However, they're just like a hammer and a saw. Can you build an entire house with only a hammer and a saw? No, you need more tools. So I hope you see my point. Try new study tools. Try online quizzes. Try outlining passages from your reading material. Try watching YouTube videos one day. See your teacher before or after school for help. Maybe rewriting your class notes, forming study groups. All of these tools will help you do better, just like you need a lot of tools to build a house. So if we look at this study calendar, notice how we're using different tools every couple days. It shouldn't take any more than 20 to 30 minutes to rewrite your notes, or 20 to 30 minutes to try an online quiz, or 20 to 30 minutes to review flashcards. This is a great idea that you might want to try to divide up your studies. Now there's one study tool that I think is better than all the other ones that I just mentioned. So which one is it? Well, let's look at this analogy. Which is the better way to learn something? Pretend that you're going to be awarded $1 million if you can pass a German proficiency test. Now you're only going to be given 1 month to study, so how you choose to study is going to be really important. So study option A. Go down to a local bookstore, buy a How to Speak German audiobook, and listen to that morning, noon, and night for 1 month. Or option B. Fly to Germany for a month, come back, take the test. Which option will teach you German better? Option B, by far option B, and here's why. Well, when you're in Germany, you're forced to speak the German language, listen to the German language, read the German language, write the German language. And by accomplishing all of these skills, you are interacting with the Germans in the German language. And this is why it's more effective. Our brain learns better by incorporating all of these skills. Well, now, can you fly to a country called biology? Well, of course not. But here's the next best thing. One of the best study methods I can suggest is to form a study group with you and a few of your classmates. It will simulate flying to Germany. Let me explain. Here's you and classmate A, B, and C. You all met at the library. You're seated around the table. If partner A says something interesting, what skill are you performing? Well, hopefully you are listening to partner A. If you want to share your thoughts, what skill are you performing? Well, by you sharing your thoughts, you're probably speaking biology. If partner B says something interesting, what can you do to remember what was said at a later date? Well, you're probably writing biology. If partner C points out something interesting in a textbook, what skill are you going to be performing? Well, you'll probably be reading biology. And because you're interacting, you're discussing main topics, you're comparing and contrasting different answers, you're defending your view from an opposing view. You are now interacting with biology, just like flying to Germany to try to understand and learn the German language. You know, creating a new routine is difficult. A great example of that happens every January come the New Year's, where people make a resolution to join a gym and get in better shape. And so maybe the plan is work out 2 days in a row, Monday and Tuesday, and then take a day of rest. And then 2 days in a row, Thursday and Friday, they work out, and then they take a day of rest. And week 1 is going great, and now week 2 comes around. You know, they work out maybe 2 days in a row, but instead of taking 1 day of rest, it stretches into 3 days of rest. Instead of working out 2 days in a row, it's only 1 day in a row before the day of rest. Come the third week, the days of rest are really taking over their routine. Maybe they make the gym once, but then the days of rest become more plentiful. Gyms around the world see this pattern every January, proving that a new routine is difficult. So please be supportive of your student. So parents, guardians, offer some help. Be supportive. Your student will likely need help as they adjust to this new routine. Ways to be supportive. You can help organize study groups. You can offer your home. You can offer to drive your student to the gathering location. You can perhaps institute a positive reinforcement plan where if your student meets the agreed upon criteria, then there's some sort of positive reinforcement for them. Perhaps you can join in on the study process. Now, I'm not suggesting that you join in the study group. Your student would be mortified if you were there. But perhaps you can, on another day where it's just you and your student, you can offer to quiz your student and to maybe check some of their work. So these are ways that you can be supportive. And I hope you found that this study calendar to be helpful. Please place your comments in the box below. I'd love to hear your feedback. Thanks for watching.